السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه كما يحب ربنا ويرضاه، وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. أما بعد. So inshallah ta'ala, today is the first class of the sisters class that we're going to be doing every Sunday, inshallah ta'ala, after Dhuhr, right? Following Salat al-Dhuhr. And we're going to continue with that inshallah throughout Ramadan. So we have the Ramadan class that is on Saturdays after Maghrib, and we're going to keep this class inshallah continuous throughout, just because the sisters have been very patient with us in requesting this class. And so now once we started, we want to try to keep it consistent so as to maximize the benefit inshallah ta'ala. So before we begin, I wanted to mention a hadith to the brothers and the sisters, right? Because there's brothers here as well. That is the hadith that is found in the Sahih al-Bukhari, where Imam al-Bukhari, he narrates from Qutayba bin Sa'id, who narrates from Jarir, from Al-A'mash, from Abu Salih, from Abu Huraira radiyallahu anhu, who said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "Inna lillahi malaikatan yatufuna fi turuq, yaltamisuna ahla dhikr." That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has angels who roam around looking for the people who are gathered together in remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَإِذَا وَجَدُوا قَوْمًا يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ تَنَادُوا هَلُمُّوا إِلَى حَاجَتِكُمْ. So when they find a group of people who have gathered to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they call out saying that you have come to your objective, or that you have reached your objective. قال فَيَحُفُّونَهُمْ بِأَجْنِحَتِهِمْ إِلَى السَّمَاءِ الدُّنْيَا. And so when they gather in this gathering, when the angels gather along with this gathering of people, they spread their wings out up until they reach the lowest heaven. So we mentioned in the hadith that the angels, they roam around looking for this gathering of people who are remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so when they find such a gathering, they call out to one another that you have reached your objective. And then they spread out their wings up until their wings reach the lowest heaven. قال فيسألهم ربهم وهو أعلم منهم ما يقول عبادي. And then their Lord asks them, even though He is more knowledgeable than them, He asks them, what are my servants saying? قالوا يقولون يسبحونك ويكبرونك ويحمدونك ويمجدونك. The angels, they answer their Lord, saying that the people in this gathering, they are glorifying you, they are magnifying you, they are praising you, and they are extolling your praise. قال فيقول هل رأوني. And then He asks them, have they seen me? قال فيقولون لا والله ما رأوك. The angels answer their Lord, saying, no, by Allah, they have not seen you. قال فيقول وكيف لو رأوني. So then Allah says to them, what if they were to see me? قال يقولون لو رأوك كانوا أشد لك عبادة وأشد لك تمجيدا وأكثر لك تسبيحا. The angels answer that if they were to see you, they would worship you even more, and they would magnify and glorify you even more. قال يقول فما يسألوني. And then Allah asks them, what are they asking of me? قال يسألونك الجنة. The angels answer, they are asking you for your paradise. قال يقول وهل رأوها. And then Allah asks, have they seen it? Have they seen the Jannah, the paradise? قال يقولون لا والله يا رب ما رأوها. And the angels answer, by Allah, O our Lord, no, they have not seen it. قال يقول فكيف لو أنهم رأوها. And then Allah asks them, what if they were to see it? قال يقولون لو أنهم رأوها كانوا أشد عليها حرصا وأشد لها طلبا وأعظم فيها رغبة. They say that if they were to see your paradise, they would desire it even more, and they would seek it even more. He says, قال فمما يتعوذون. So what is it that they are seeking refuge from? قال فيقول من النار, that they are seeking refuge from your fire. قال يقول وهل رأوها. Then Allah asks them, have they seen the fire of hell? قال يقولون لا والله ما رأوها. They say, no, by Allah, they have not seen it. قال يقول فكيف لو رأوها. Then Allah asks them, what if they were to see the fire of hell? قال يقولون لو رأوها كانوا أشد منها فرارا وأشد لها مخافة. And the angels answer him, saying that if they had seen the fire of hell, then they would flee from it even more, and they would be afraid of it even more. قال فيقول فأشهدكم أني قد غفرت لهم. Then Allah says, then I call upon you, meaning the angels, as a witness that I have already forgiven them. قال يقول ملك من الملائكة فيهم فلان ليس منهم إنما جاء لحاجة. And then one of those angels, he says to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that there is a man who is not part of the gathering, meaning he didn't intend to come for that remembrance, but he came for a particular need. So he's sitting with them for that particular need, right? So he happens to be there because he came for another reason. قال هم الجلساء لا يشقى بهم جليسهم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says that any companion of these individuals will not be in misery. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives that person as well. So we wanted to mention this hadith at the beginning of our lesson today, that even though this is a lesson that is specific to the sisters, and the sisters are going to be given precedence in this lesson, that we encourage the brothers to attend as well, right? Because all of the brothers have, mothers and daughters and sisters and wives and so on and so forth, and that this is information that all of us are in need of knowing, right? Not just the sisters. So basically, just to give a brief introduction as to what we're going to be covering, we're going to be using initially for this class the book of Shaykh Salih bin Fawzan al-Fawzan, which we translated as what information, what was on the flyer? Like notification for the believing woman, right? Or the issues that the believing women are to know, right? We translated something to that effect. And so basically, Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan, hafidhahullah ta'ala, is from the contemporary scholars of the Ummah today upon the way of the Quran and the Sunnah, with the understanding of the Salaf al-Salih, of the early Muslims, and he is known for holding fast to the correct aqidah, the correct creed, and the correct methodology and the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he is from the most knowledgeable people in that regard in the Ummah today. So it's his book that we're going to be covering initially, and once we finish this book, if Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala allows us to live, we're going to be covering other books as we continue to have the sisters class, inshallah. So just as a brief outline, the issues that are going to be discussed in this book throughout the classes are as follows, right? The first chapter, which we're going to begin today, is just ahkamun amma. It's like an introduction, right? It's like an introduction to the status of the women in Islam and what their status was before Islam and how Islam changed that and so forth. Then we're going to get into bayanu ahkam takhtassu bitazyin al-jismi lil-mar'a, the rulings and regulations pertaining to how the Muslim woman adorns her body, right? How she adorns her body. After that, there's going to be ahkam takhtassu bil-hayd wal-istihada wal-nifas, rulings and regulations pertaining to menses and menstruation, postpartum bleeding, and so forth. After that, we have rulings and regulations pertaining to al-libas wal-hijab, clothing and covering, right? How she clothes herself and how she covers herself. After that, we have rulings and regulations pertaining to al-mar'a fi salatiha, the prayer of the woman, right? And the issues pertaining to how the Muslim woman prays, right? That doesn't necessarily mean the methodology of prayer, because we all pray as the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed, but his rulings specific to the women with regards to the prayer. طيب. Then we have أحكام تختص بالمرأة في باب أحكام الجنائز, rulings pertaining to the woman with regards to the funeral prayer and the funeral procession. أحكام تختص بالمرأة في باب الصيام, rulings pertaining to the woman with regards to fasting, right? Fasting in the month of Ramadan and otherwise. Then we have rulings and regulations for the Muslim woman in Al-Hajj and Al-Umrah, right? The major and minor pilgrimages. Then we have rulings and regulations بالزوجية وإنهائها, right? Marriage and divorce. Affairs pertaining to marriage and divorce as they relate to the Muslim woman. This is a brief summary of the topics that are going to be discussed in this particular book, inshallah ta'ala. And we're going to begin with the first part of that today. We're obviously not going to get to all of those issues today, but we're going to begin the discussion today, inshallah ta'ala. So in the first part, he begins by discussing makanatul mar'ati qabla al-Islam, right? What was the status of the woman before Islam? Right, the status of the Muslim woman before Islam. ويراد بما قبل الإسلام عصر الجاهلية التي كان يعيشها العرب بصفة خاصة ويعيشها أهل الأرض بصفة عامة. What is meant, as Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan says, when we talk about before Islam, what is meant by before Islam is the times of al-Jahiliyyah, the pre-Islamic times of ignorance, in which the Arabs specifically lived, or how the Arabs conducted themselves specifically, and how the people of the earth in general lived, right, before the advent of al-Islam. حيث كان الناس في فترة من الرسل ودروس من السبل. The people lived at that time before the coming of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a prophet and messenger. There was an interval of time between the messengers, right? And the paths of truth had become unknown, right, and doubtful to the people. So the people were living in times of al-Jahiliyyah, living in times of ignorance, not guided by revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, following their desires and so on and so forth. وَقَدْ نَظَرَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِمْ كَمَا جَاءَ فِي الْحَدِيثِ فَمَقَتَهُمْ عَرَبَهُمْ وَعَجَمَهُمْ. And as occurs in the hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that Allah looked at the people of the earth at that time, and He hated them, the Arabs and the non-Arabs. إِلَّا بَقَايَا مِنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ, except for remnants from the people of the book, right? Remnants from the Jews and the Christians, those who were still trying to hold on to the original message of their prophets and messengers, right? But they were a small minority among the people of the earth. وكانت المرأة في هذا الوقت في الأغلب الأعم تعيش فترة عصيبة خصوصا في المجتمع العربي. And he mentions that at that time, women in general, and in most cases, were living a very difficult life, especially in the Arab society, right? Women were living a very difficult life, especially in the Arab society. حيث كان يكرهون ولادتها. So starting with their difficulty was the fact that in that time among the Arabs it was hated to have a daughter, right? So from the time she's born, she's a problem, right? Because they hated to have daughters born to them. فمنهم من كان يدفنها وهي حية حتى تموت تحت التراب. So among the Arabs there were those who would bury their young daughters alive, right, up until they died beneath the earth, right? They would bury their young daughters, right, babies alive until they died beneath the earth. If they gave birth to a daughter. فمنهم من يتركها تبقى في حياة الذل والمهانة. And then from them were those who would allow their daughters to live, and when they lived, they would live a life of humiliation and disgrace, right, throughout their lives. كما قال الله تعالى, as Allah Ta'ala said in the Quran, وَإِذَا بُشِّرَ أَحَدُهُمْ بِالْأُنْثَى ظَلَّ وَجْهُهُ مَسْوَدًّا وَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ يتوارى من القوم من سوء ما بشر به أيمسكه على هون أم يدسه في التراب ألا ساء ما يحكمون. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He mentions this in the Quran in Surah An-Nahl, ayah number 58 through 59, where He says that when one of them is given the news that he has a daughter that was born to him, his face becomes dark and he is overcome with grief, right, inward grief, and he begins to hide from the rest of the people because of the bad news that he has received, and he begins to decide, is he going to allow her to live a life of disgrace, or is he going to bury her beneath the earth? And Allah says, أَلَا سَاءَ مَا يَحْكُمُونَ, how evil is the way that they judge. وقال تعالى, Allah Ta'ala said, وَإِذَا الْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ. The two ayats from Surah At-Takwir, ayahs 8 through 9. When the young baby girl asks, for what sin was she killed? Right? Why was she killed? Al-Maw'uda, the term that is used in the ayah here, Al-Maw'uda, this is Al-Bint Tudfanu Hayyatan Hatta Tamutu Tahta Turab. This specifically refers to the young girl who was buried alive up until she dies beneath the earth. Right? Showing that this is something, the people who did this will be questioned about this on the Day of Judgment. Right? And that young girl, she will be asking on the Day of Judgment why they killed her when she hadn't done anything to them. Shaykh Shalih al-Fawzan, he says, وَإِذَا سَلَمَتْ مِنَ الْوَأْدِ وَعَاشَتْ فَإِنَّهَا تَعِيشُ عِيشَةٌ مُهَانَةٌ. And if she were to not be buried at that time, right, if they allowed any of their daughters to live, then she would go on to live a life of humiliation. فَلَيْسَ لَهَا حَظٌّ مِنْ مِيرَاثِ قَرِيبِهَا. So from their customs was that the woman would not be allowed to inherit anything from her close relatives, right? If any of her close relatives died, the woman, even if though she's a close relative, it may be her father who died and left behind some wealth, and maybe her mother, right, her brothers and sisters, whoever died in her family, she would not be allowed to inherit anything from their wealth or property. مهما كثرت أمواله ومهما عانت من الفقر والحاجة. Right? Regardless of how wealthy they may have been, the people who died, and no matter how much she may be in need and in poverty, right? She would not be allowed to inherit anything from her family members. لأنهم يخصون الميراث بالرجال دون النساء. Because what they did was they specified inheritance as something that only men could receive. So only the men received any inheritance, right? And the women received nothing. The Shaykh says, بل إنها كانت تورث عن زوجها الميت كما يورث ماله. Right? Rather, right, to make things worse, not only was she not allowed to inherit anything, rather if she had a husband, for example, who died, she would be inherited by whoever he left his wealth to. So the same way that his wealth and property get inherited by somebody else, she would also get inherited by somebody else, as if she was another part of his wealth and property. Right? This is how the women were treated prior to Islam. وكان الجمع الكثير من النساء يعشن تحت زوج واحد حيث كانوا لا يتقيدون بعدد محدد من الزوجات غير عابئين بما ينالهن من الجراء ذلك المضايقات والإحراجات والظلم. Likewise, from the things that the women suffered from at that time was that the men would be allowed to marry many women, right? And there was no limit to the amount of women that they would marry. There was no numerical limit for the wives that they could take. So they would take many wives, and these wives in many cases would be left unprotected from the crimes and the difficulties and the oppression that was committed against them, right? Because the men would take on more wives than they could actually take care of, right? And the women would be left to basically fend for themselves. This was the position of the women prior to Islam. Then he mentions makanatul mar'ati fil Islam. So now we're going to discuss the position of the woman in the religion of Islam, right? What did Islam change when Islam came? From that condition that we discuss now to when the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came and established the religion of Islam. He says, فَلَمَّا جَاءَ الْإِسْلَامِ رُفِعَ هَذِهِ الْمَظَالِمِ عن المرأة وأعاد لها اعتبارها في الإنسانية. So when the religion of Islam came, these forms of oppression were lifted from the woman, and she was returned back to her position and her consideration that she has among mankind and in humanity. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He said, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. Allah says, O people, surely we have created you from a male and a female. This is from Surah Al-Hujurat, ayah number 13. Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan, hafidhahullah ta'ala, may Allah ta'ala preserve and protect him, he says, فَذَكَرَ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى أَنَّهَا شَرِيكَةُ الرَّجُلِ فِي مَبْدَأِ الْإِنسَانِيَّةِ. So Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, He mentions to us in this ayah that the woman, she was the partner to the man in starting the race of mankind, right? Because Allah said we created you from a male and a female. So she was a partner to the man from the beginning. كما هي شريكة الرجل في الثواب والعقاب على العمل. Right? Just as the woman is also a partner to the man in terms of the rewards and the punishments that she gets for her deeds, meaning from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Just as the man is rewarded for the good deeds that he does and punished for his evil deeds, the woman is dealt with in the same way by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. طيب. So then Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He said, من عمل صالحا من ذكر أو أنثى وهو مؤمن فلنحيينه حياة طيبة ولنجزينهم أجرهم بأحسن ما كانوا يعملون. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He said in Surah An-Nahl, ayah number 97, that whoever does righteousness or does a good deed, whether they are male or female, and he's a believer, then we will surely allow them to live a life of goodness, and we will reward them with the best of rewards for what they used to do. Right? So the point here is that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is making sure to point out that this is for the men and the women, right? That they are the same when it comes to the rewards for their good deeds. Likewise, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala mentioned the evil deeds, where He said, لِيُعَذَّبَ اللَّهُ الْمُنَافِقِينَ وَالْمُنَافِقَاتِ وَالْمُشْرِكِينَ وَالْمُشْرِكَاتِ. That Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala will surely punish the hypocrites, male and female, and the mushrikeen, the people of shirk, again, male and female. This is from Surah Al-Ahzab, ayah number 73. Then Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan mentions, وَحَرَّمَ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى اعتبار المرأة من جملة الموروثات الزوج الميت. And Allah made it haram. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it unlawful to consider the woman a commodity to be inherited at the death of her husband, right? As we said that in the times of Al-Jahiliyyah, the woman would be something to be inherited after her husband died, in the same way that his wealth and his property were inherited after he died. So Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He said in Surah An-Nisa, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا يُحِلُّ لَكُمْ أَن تَرِثُوا النِّسَاءَ كَرْهًا. O you who believe, it is not lawful for you to inherit the women, right, against their will. This is from Surah An-Nisa, ayah number 19. فضمن لها استقلال شخصيتها وجعلها وارثة لا موروثة. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the woman her independence over her person, and He made her an inheritor, not something to be inherited, right? That she inherits and she is not inherited. Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan, he says, وَجَعَلَ لِلْمَرْأَةِ حَقًّا فِي الْمِيرَاثِ مِنْ مَالِ قَرِيبِهَا. Likewise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gave the woman a right to a portion of the inheritance from the wealth of her close relatives. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He said, لِلرِّجَالِ نَصِيبٌ مِمَّا تَرَكَ الْوَالِدَانِ وَالْأَقْرَبُونَ وَلِلنِّسَاءِ نَصِيبٌ مِمَّا تَرَكَ الْوَالِدَانِ وَالْأَقْرَبُونَ مِمَّا قَلَّ مِنْهُ أو كثر نصيبا مفروضا. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He mentions in Surah An-Nisa, ayah number 7, that the men have a portion of what is left behind by their parents and their close relatives. And the women have a portion of what is left behind by their parents and close relatives, from that which is either small or large, right? A legal portion. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala established in this ayah that the women inherit, even though before Islam they were not allowed to inherit anything. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He sent down rules and regulations for that inheritance. As Allah said, يُوصِيكُمُ اللَّهُ فِي أَوْلَادِكُمْ لِلذَّكَرِ مِثْلُ حَظِّ الْأُنْثَيَيْنِ فَإِنْ كُنَّ نِسَاءً فَوْقَ اثْنَتَيْنِ فَلَهُنَّ الثُّلُثَ مَا تَرَكَ وَإِنْ كَانَتْ وَاحِدَةً فَلَهَا النِّصْفُ. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, again in Surah An-Nisa, ayah number 11, He mentions that Allah commands you with regards to your children, that the male child has the portion of 2 females. And if there are 2 or more females, then they have a third of whatever is left. And if there is 1 female, then she has half of what is left, and so on and so forth, right? There's detailed regulations with regards to the inheritance. Al-Ustad, Al-Sheikh Abu Hakim Bilal Davis, he actually has a series of classes going over the text Al-Rahbiyya with regards to the laws of inheritance in Islam, and it's available online. I believe they've completed the classes, right? And so anyone who wants those details, inshallah ta'ala, can refer to those classes online. Walillahi alhamd. So the point here was just to show that Islam not only gave the woman the inheritance when she had none, but then the religion of Islam regulated how the inheritance is to be divided out between the men and the women. Then Shaykh Salih Fawzan, he moves on. He says, وَفِي مَجَالِ الزَّوْجِيَّةِ حصر الله الزوج على 4 حدا أعلى بشرط القيام بالعدل المستطاع بين الزوجات. That now in the issue of marriage, as we said previously, they would marry as many women as they wanted, even if the women were left without any protection. So the religion of Islam limited the amount of women you can marry to 4, right? With the condition that you deal justly with your wives as much as you are able. وَأَوْجَبُ مَعَاشَرَتَهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. And the religion of Islam obligates you to live with your wives honorably. فقال سبحانه وتعالى وعاشرهن بالمعروف. So Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He said, and live with them honorably, right? In Surah An-Nisa, ayah number 19. وجعل الصداق حقا لها وأمر بإعطائها إياه كاملا إلا ما سمحت به عن طيب النفس. Likewise, in Islam we are commanded to give the woman her right with regards to the dowry, right? Whatever the dowry was that was agreed upon in the contract, that it is to be given to her in full, unless out of her own good nature she decides to let go of a certain part of the dowry, but that decision is hers, right? If she decides to do it, then it can be remitted, but otherwise the husband is obligated to give her in full what he said he would do in their contract. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He said, وَأْتُوا النِّسَاءَ صُدَاقَتِهِنَّ نِحْلَةً فَإِن طِبْنَ لَكُمْ عَنْ شَيْءٍ مِّنْهُ نَفْسًا فَكُلُوهُ هَنِيًّا مَرِيًّا. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He said in Surah An-Nisa, ayah number 4, and give the women their dowries with a good heart, right? Meaning give it to them happily. And if they were to decide out of their good nature to remit a part of it, then you can leave that part out. And you can take that for yourself. Shaykh Salih Fawzan, he says, وَجَعَلَهُ اللَّهُ رَاعِيَةً آمِرَةً نَاهِيَةً فِي بَيْتِ زَوْجِهَا أَمِيرَةً عَلَى أَوْلَادِهَا. That Allah has made the woman a guardian and an authority in her home, and that she is an authority over her children, right, in the home. قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said, المرأة راعية في بيت زوجها, that the woman is a guardian over the home of her husband. ومسؤولة عن رعيتها, and she is responsible for those under her care, right, meaning the children that are under her care. وأوجب على الزوج نفقتها وكسوتها بالمعروف, And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala has obligated upon the husband that he has to spend on her, right? And he has to clothe her in an honorable manner, right? Which is something that I guess can be left up to interpretation, as that varies from land to land and place to place, right? But generally, whatever the husband would clothe himself with, right? He should at least be giving her what he does for himself, right? And we say that with some caution, because unfortunately, we have some brothers who, purposely live below their means and don't take care of themselves, and then they expect their wives to live in that way as well. That's not living honorably, right? And so we have to be fair, right? Especially if you're living with your wife and other sisters, for example, are giving your wife clothes because they see she doesn't have proper clothes to wear, or shoes because they see that she doesn't have proper shoes to wear. That should be a red flag to a husband that, this is my responsibility, right? It's one thing if someone gave her a gift. That's not what we're talking about. But if they're giving her clothes and shoes and things because they see that, she doesn't have sufficient clothes and shoes and so forth, that's a problem, right? That's a problem that the husband is going to be asked about on the Day of Judgment. طيب. So now we come to the third section, and I think this is the final section that we're covering today, and that is ما يريده أعداء الإسلام وأفراخهم اليوم من سلب المرأة كرامتها وانتزاع حقوقها. What is it that the enemies of Islam, right, and their supporters today want in terms of stripping the woman of her nobility and stripping away her rights, right? And so Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan, he says أن أعداء الإسلام بل أعداء الإنسانية اليوم من الكفار والمنافقين والذين في قلوبهم مرض غاضهم ما نالته المرأة المسلمة من كرامة وعزة وصيانة في الإسلام. He says that the enemies of the religion of Islam, rather the enemies of mankind today, from the kuffar, the disbelievers, those who disbelieve in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the munafiqeen, those who outwardly claim to profess Islam, but inwardly they are disbelievers. He says that they have a disease in their hearts, which causes them to become enraged due to the nobility and the honor and the dignity that the religion of Islam has given to the Muslim woman. لأن أعداء الإسلام من الكفار والمنافقين يريدون أن تكون المرأة أداة تدمير وحبالة يصطادون بها ضعاف الإيمان وأصحاب غرائز الجانحة بعد أن يشبع منها شهواتهم المسعورة. Right, so Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan, he says that they become enraged, right? They become enraged because of what the religion of Islam has bestowed upon the Muslim woman. Why? Because, he says, the enemies of Islam, from the kuffar and the munafiqeen, from the disbelievers and the hypocrites, they want the woman to be used as a tool of destruction. Right? I'll say that again. The reason why they become enraged is because the enemies of Islam, right, who are which two groups? The kuffar and the munafiqeen, right? They want the woman, he said they want the woman to be used as a tool of destruction. And so they use her as a snare to hunt and trap those who have weak iman, those who are weak in their faith and their belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and those who are governed by their impulses and emotions, right? And so they want them to use the Muslim woman, and after they have satisfied themselves with her, they've satisfied their lusts and their desires, then they leave her in that state. As Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He said, وَيُرِيدُ الَّذِينَ يَتَّبِعُونَ الشَّهَوَاتِ أَن تَمِيلُوا مَيْلًا عَظِيمًا. That those who want to follow their lusts and desires, they want to place you far astray. This is from Surah An-Nisa, ayah number 27. He said, وَالَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ يُرِيدُونَ مِنَ الْمَرْأَةِ أَن تَكُونَ سَلْعَةً رَخِيصَةً في معرض أصحاب الشهوات والنزغات الشيطانية. And he begins to explain what he's talking about, right? He said that those who have a disease in their hearts, min al-muslimin, now he's talking about the Muslims, right? Those who have a disease in their hearts from the Muslims, they want the woman to be used as a cheap commodity in the exhibitions for the people of shahwat, the people of lusts and desires, and an-nazaghat ash-shaytaniyya, and satanic whims and desires, right? They want to use the woman to seduce these types of people. سلعة مكشوفة أمام أعينهم يتمتعون بجمال منظرها أو يتواصلون منها إلى ما هو أقبح من ذلك. So they want to use the woman as an uncovered product in front of the eyes of these men who would satisfy themselves by looking at her, or they would reach a level that is more disgraceful than that, meaning they would do something with her, right? And so the people are trying to use the woman in this regard, right? And we see that, examples of that all around us, right? Women are used to sell everything in this country, right? And that's what they do. They uncover themselves, right? Or they're told to uncover themselves, right? To help people make money. طيب. ولذلك حرصوا على أن تخرج من بيتها لتشارك الرجال في أعمالهم جنبا إلى جنب. And the Shaykh says, so this is why they are diligent in having her come out of her home, so that she may join the men and work in their places of work side by side with the men. أو لتخدم الرجال ممرضة في المستشفى, or that she may work as a nurse attending to men in a hospital. أو مضيفة في الطائرة, or that she may work as a hostess in an airplane. أو دارسة أو مدرسة في فصول الدراسة المختلطة, or that she may be a student or work as a teacher in the classes in the schools where the genders are mixed, right? We're not talking about the schools where the genders are segregated, that's a different story, right? But the ones where she has to mix with men. أو ممثلة في مسرح أو مغنية, right? Or that she, worse than that, she works as an actress in a theatrical play, right? Or nowadays you could say in the movies. Or she's a singer. أو مذيعة في وسائل الإعلام المختلفة سافرة فاتنة بصوتها وصورتها, or that she works as a broadcaster on the news, right? In the media, where she uncovers her face and the people, they hear her voice and they see her image, right? And notice the Shaykh mentioned about her voice, and we're going to get to more of that as well, right? Many of the sisters, may Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala grant them success, right? They don't realize that their voice is also a cause of fitna, right? Not for themselves, but for men who have a sickness in their hearts, as Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala said. And so the woman should be careful with regards to raising their voices in places where they can be heard by men who are non-mahram to them, unless of course there's a necessity in which she needs to say something, and there's no other way around it. But in general, the woman should beware of their voices, right? One of the things that you'll see, unfortunately, now, and even the sisters who hold fast to the Salafi da'wah, some of them have fallen into it, right? They'll be placing things online, and they won't have pictures of themselves online, but they'll have their voice online for the whole dunya to see, right? And the women should be careful with regards to this. And I would advise the husbands as well to watch over what your families are doing online, and advise them when you see these kinds of things, right? Because a lot of times the husbands, they like to just turn a blind eye to what their families are doing and not be bothered with it, right? But a husband who has jealousy, the legislated jealousy of his wife, would not allow his wife to do these kinds of things. طيب. واتخذت المجلات الخليعة من صور الفتيات الفاتنات العاريات وسيلة لترويج مجلاتهم وتسويقها. And likewise, the Shaykh mentions that you have these magazines that use pictures of young girls, right, and young women in various stages of undress and nakedness, and they use this as a means to increase the sales and the distribution of their magazines. واتخذ بعض التجار وبعض المصانع من هذه الصور أيضا وسيلة لترويج بضائعهم حيث وضعوا هذه الصور على معروضاتهم ومنتجاتهم. Likewise, the Shaykh says you have businessmen, right, and people who manufacture different things. They use the pictures of the women as a means to sell their products and they set up these pictures in their exhibitions, to sell their products in their stores and their shows and so forth. وبسبب هذه الإجراءات الخاطئة تخلت المرأة على وظيفتها الحقيقية في البيت، مما اضطر أزواجهن إلى جلب الخادمات الأجنبيات لتربية أولادهم وتنظيم شؤون بيوتهم، مما سبب كثيرا من الفتن وجلب عظيما من الشرور. And so the Shaykh, he mentions that as a result of these ijra'at, right, al-khatiya, as a result of the women falling into this boldness that is incorrect, right, going into these fields that we mentioned, and undressing and allowing people to see them and so forth, and going into working alongside the men and so forth. He said, as a result of them doing this, the women, they fall short with regards to their real duty, right, which is in their homes, right, with their families. And so what happens as a result of this is that now their husbands and their families are in need of other women, right, non-mahram women, ajnabiyat, right, sometimes foreign women who are not even Muslim. You're in need of other women now to come in and teach your children, whether it's in the home or otherwise. And you're in need of other women to come in and take care of the affairs of your home, right? Like we have now housekeepers that come and take care of the home and clean the home and so forth, because the women of the home are out doing something else, right? So you're in need of those women now to come in and take care of those affairs that are the responsibility of the woman of the house. And as a result of that, the Shaykh said that there are great evils that take place. And then he adds, and we're going to inshallah end on this note, إننا لا نمانع من عمل المرأة خارج بيتها إذا كان بالضوابط الآتية. He said that we don't prohibit the woman unrestrictedly that she can't ever work outside the home, but he said that the following conditions should be fulfilled for her to work outside the home. And he's going to mention 4 main conditions, right? The first is أن تحتاج إلى هذا العمل أو يحتاج المجتمع إليه بحيث لا يوجد من يقوم به من الرجال. The first condition for the woman working outside the home is that the work that she is doing, this is work that the society is in need of, that someone in the society has to do this work, and there's nobody from the men who are currently doing it. Right? That's the first condition. The work that she has to leave her home to go outside to do, the work that she is doing is work that no one else from the men is currently doing. So there's a need for someone to do it, and there's nobody from the men who's currently doing it. Right? So she goes out to do that work. That's the first condition. The second is أن يكون ذلك بعد قيامها بعمل البيت الذي هو عملها الأساسي. That this work that she is leaving outside the home to do, this comes in second to her work in her home, which is her foundation, right? Her foundational work, meaning her primary work, right? Her primary work is in the home, with her in the home with her family, her children, and her husband, and so forth. So if she can take care of all that, and then she has time to go out and do something else, right? Then that's what she does. That's her secondary work. Number 3, the third condition, أن يكون هذا العمل في محيط النساء. That this work that she's doing, it should be within the domain of the women, right? The work that she's doing, it should be within the domain of the women. And he gives some examples of this: كتعليم النساء وتطبيب أو تمريض النساء ويكون منعزلا عن الرجال. Right? So, for example, within the domain of the woman, like she's going out to teach women something, right? An example of that, when we were in Mecca recently, we went to the masjid of Sheikh Muhammad bin Adam al-Ethiopi, hafidhahullah ta'ala. So his masjid, it's right across the street from the al-Qura Women's University, right? And so in that university, the teachers and all of the staff are women, the students are all women, and there's no men inside, right? The only men that you'll see there are the security guards who stand guard outside to make sure no other men go inside and disturb the woman, right? So that would be an example. And if she were to take a teaching job at a university like that, where all of her students are girls and women, all of her colleagues at work are all women, and so forth, and she's not mixing with the men, right? The Shaykh mentioned also if she's a physician who treats only women, or she's a nurse who treats only women, and that she is able to remain segregated away from the men who are not mahram to her, right? Who are not part of her family. So that was the third condition, right? That work has to be within the domain of the women. The fourth condition that he mentions is كذلك لا مانع بل يجب على المرأة أن تتعلم أمور دينها. And then he says, likewise, there's nothing to prevent the woman. He said, rather, it is obligatory upon her to learn the affairs of her religion. So this is actually something a little bit separate, right? He's not actually talking about going out to work anymore, even though he lists this as point number 4. So he said that there's nothing to prevent her from going out. Rather, it is obligatory for her to go out if it is to learn the affairs of her religion. وَلَا مَانِعْ أَن تَعَلَّمَ مِنْ أُمُورِ دِينِهَا مَا تَحْتَاجُ إِلَيْهِ. And there is nothing to prevent her from going out to learn the affairs of her religion that she is in need of learning. وَيَكُونَ التَّعْلِيمُ فِي مَحِيطِ النِّسَاءِ. Right, and the learning is within the domain of the women. وَلَا بَأْسْ أَن تَحْضُرَ الدُّرُوسِ فِي الْمَسْجِدِ وَنَحْوِهِ. And there is nothing wrong with her attending the lessons in the masjid and the like. وَتَكُونُ مُنْتَشِرَةً وَمُنْعَزِلَةً عَنِ الرِّجَالِ. وَتَكُونُ مُتَسَتِّرَةً وَمُنْعَزِلَةً عَنِ الرِّجَالِ. Right, as long as she can remain covered and separated from the men. Right, as long as there's a place in the masjid for the women that is separate from the men, right, and she's not seen by the men and so forth, that she can go to the masjid and attend the lessons. على ضوء ما كانت النساء في صدر الإسلام يعملن ويتعلمن ويحضرن إلى المساجد. And this was the example of the women in the early part of Islam, that they would go and learn and they would attend the lessons in the masajid. طيب. So inshallah we'll stop here for today. That was basically the first section of the book, and inshallah ta'ala next week Sunday we'll be here again, and we're going to begin the section on the tazeen al-jismi, right? How the woman adorns her body. We'll begin that next week inshallah. So if you have any questions or any corrections or anything that needs to be clarified about what we covered today, this was basically just an introduction to what we're going to, the more complicated issues or more complex issues that we're going to get into, and this kind of sets the stage for those issues inshallah. So maybe there's no questions. If there are,
mention again, I remember it just reminded me when you was talking about the dangers, or like how the history of, like in the 1900s or something, how they, when women started going out, and how the divorce rate and stuff. You got to touch on that? It was kind of like that. Remember?
No, the brother's mentioning a good point, and I don't remember the statistics offhand, but I know we've seen that, especially here in the United States, they said that the rates of infidelity and divorce increased considerably, all right, because that was the time when the women started going out to work. Before that, it was not common, right? Before that, it was not common. Even during World War II, when a lot of the men were, overseas fighting, the women were mainly working with other women at that time because there weren't that many men around. But when this all began to change and the women's movement, began to, gain some ascendancy in the 1950s, and the women began to start working in the same workplaces as men, they saw that the rates of divorce and also the rates of infidelity, shot up. I don't have the exact statistics on me. This is something that is widely known and can be easily found, inshaAllah ta'ala.
I don't know if they have questions.
You're gonna ask them again. You said you give some proof.
Yeah, I mean, as we said, this class, the precedence is given to the sisters, right? So we're taking questions from the brothers because the brothers are right here. But whatever questions the sisters have, inshallah, we'll take them. The other thing, like I was explaining to one of the brothers earlier, what I wanted to do for this class, because this class is we want to make sure we go into proper detail and we take the proper time. So depending on what kind of questions we get from the sisters, we're going to take all of the questions, inshallah. We may not answer all of the questions right now and today. And the reason why I say that is because some of the questions, I think may need more time and care. So some of the questions we may keep and put together the proper research so that we can come back the following week and answer those questions and give them the right that they deserve. So don't feel like we're skipping people's questions. Inshallah, that's not our intention. We're going to keep all of the questions, and we're going to make sure that we, give every question, it's right, and that we cover it properly with evidences and proofs and so forth.
It's a delay over there, so.
There's a what?
It's a delay.
Okay.
So we so far here, over here right now.
Yeah,
They
okay.
just now,
There's a delay online.
yeah. So it's going to be in.
Khayr, inshallah. We'll give the sisters a few more minutes then, inshallah.
No questions.
No questions?
Say.
No.
So were you saying that the woman was actually property to be inherited by people?
Yeah, so before Islam, and Allah, this is why Allah prohibited it in Surah An-Nisa, because before Islam, if a woman had a husband and her husband died, she was basically part of his property to be inherited, along with his home and his wealth and everything else, and his woman, his wife, would also be inherited as a piece of property. And the religion of Islam prohibited this, and this is why the Shaykh said that Islam gave her independence over her person. She's not a piece of property anymore. She's a human being, and she inherits, and she's not inherited.
Can you show me the ayat again?
No, 1 second.
The sisters asking for homework.
Homework. Alhamdulillah, there's no homework so far, unless the sisters want to write a summary of what we covered today based on their notes. I'm sure the sisters are taking notes, because I know they have the notebooks that one of the sisters provided on the sister side, just like we have it here on the brother side. But I would say what we can assign as homework is that they give us a summary of what were the points that were covered, right? Contrast, what did the Shaykh say about the status of the woman before Islam and how it changed after Islam, right? And the third thing that we covered was, what do the enemies of Islam desire for the woman, right? So any summary that you can do with regards to that, put it in writing and send it up to us, and inshallah we'll go through and read all of them, and maybe we'll present the best ones, inshallah. I think the brothers should do that as well, since we're going to assign it to the sisters, right? We'll assign it to the brothers as well. So there you go. So the ayah, Hanif, you said is يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا يحل لكم أن تورثوا النساء كرها. O you who believe, it is not lawful for you to inherit the woman against their will. This is Surah An-Nisa, ayah number 19. That's the one? No.
Say it one more time.
The homework?
Yeah.
So the homework is basically based on your notes. Oh, the ayah? Surah An-Nisa is the fourth surah, right? Fourth surah in the Quran. And verse number 19.
That was interesting. I was reading an article about the Mormons and how they have so many they have unlimited amount of wives.
Yep.
But at any time, their wives could become property of another, and they reassign them. They call it reassignment.
Allah Subhanahu. Alhamdulillah for Islam.
Four conditions for working outside the home.
Mormon.
Was that?
Repeat the four conditions for working outside the home.
Yeah, so he lists 4 conditions, right? But like actually, when you read it, the 4th one, I guess, is not really pertaining to working outside the home. It's more pertaining to learning outside the home, right? So the conditions, to summarize, the first condition that he mentioned was أن تحتاج إلى هذا العمل أو يحتاج المجتمع إليه. So the work that she does outside the home is work that the society is in need of, and there's nobody from the men who is currently doing that work, right? So she's doing it because there's a need for it, and nobody from the men is available to do it or doing it. That's the first condition. The second one is أن يكون ذلك بعد قيامها بعمل البيت الذي هو عملها الأساسي. That whatever time she puts into that work outside the home, that comes after her primary work, which is in the home, right? With her husband and her children, and taking care of her home and so forth. That's her primary work, and whatever work she does outside comes secondary to that. That's the second condition. The third condition is أن يكون هذا العمل في محيط النساء, that this work should be within the domain of the woman. And he gave examples, like if she were to take a teaching job where she is teaching women only, right? Or she's a physician, she's a doctor, and she treats women only. Or she's a nurse and she treats women only. And the Shaykh mentions وَيَكُونُ مُنْعَزِلًا عَنِ الرِّجَالِ, that she's able to work separate and segregated away from the men. Right? That was the third condition. The fourth, he listed it as the fourth condition, but it's actually a little bit different. He mentioned that there's nothing wrong, rather it's obligatory upon the woman to go out to seek the knowledge of her religion that she is in need of. Right? As long as she is, fi muhit al-nisa, she's within the domain of women, and she can attend the lessons. There's nothing wrong with her attending the lessons in the masjid, as long as she is covered and separated away from the men. And the Shaykh mentioned that the women in the early times of Islam used to do this. They used to go out and attend the lessons in the masjid, right, with those conditions. So there's nothing else. Inshallah, we can end here. We'll go ahead and end here, inshallah. سبحانك اللهم لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. I know, turn this off.